Sweet. All right. So you all ready?
Yep. You?
I am. I am.
Air high five?
Yes. I can add on an effect later on,
Yeah.
an explosion or something. Welcome to the show with me, Dan, and my guest, Faiza. How you doing, Faiza?
I'm good, thanks, Dan. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. I'm very excited to have you on the show. When we spoke for the first time this year, which was the first time we'd spoken in a few years, I remembered that one of the reasons I became more interested in sound and doing this sort of thing, like radio, podcast type thing, was actually when we met each other, which I'll go into in a bit. You were also doing radio stuff, or you were involved in sort of radio stuff at the time, weren't you?
Yeah, I was. I was attempting it, but I think you've done a much better job than I have.
I don't know about that.
You've got the voice for it, Dan.
The deep voice.
The deep voice.
But yeah, so first of all, I want to say thank you for that, because
Oh,
your passion for it at the time was definitely one of the reasons that has led me here. So yeah, I'll on that note, I'll sort of just introduce how we know each other and why I wanted you on the show.
please
Um,
do.
yeah, so me and Pfizer, we met on a program called ICS, International Citizens Service, and that was also part of something called VSO Nepal, which is VSO is Voluntary Services Overseas, and basically we went abroad to Nepal for 3 months.
I, how- so I'm giggling because I have that problem as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, in Nepal, you sound very English if you say Nepal, but then
Yeah,
but then
yeah,
I find I
totally.
sound really pretentious, or people just don't understand what I'm saying if I say Nepal in England. They're like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
Nepal. But yeah, so we weren't in the same community. We were in the same sort of group that would meet once a week, but we were in separate Nepali communities with our own counterpart, our own Nepali counterpart, and yeah, so we got to know each other really well during that time. And yeah, I just think we had some really nice moments during that trip, and when I was putting this podcast together, there were certain people that I knew I wanted to speak to, but not necessarily know exactly what I wanted to speak about. And Omar, who was also on that trip, was one of them, and you were as well. So yeah, that's sort of how we met, and it's also one of the reasons I wanted you on the show. And also, I think what we're going to probably discuss largely in this conversation is you're a person of faith, and I'm not. So I think that is very intriguing to me. You know, this podcast was meant and continues to be talking to people that I find have really interesting and different views on things, and interesting experiences, and trying to get different points of view out there. So yeah, so I don't know if maybe you could start with describing or saying your experience of what is your faith, and yeah, what's been your sort of general experience with that, yeah, over the years, I guess, or just what is your faith?
Well, thank you, Dan, for having me on. I'm super excited to have this conversation.
Yes, great.
Um, so I'm Muslim, which means that I follow the religion of Islam.
Hmm.
I was born a Muslim, so my whole family are Muslim. And essentially, Islam is a religion that was kind of, we believe, was revealed 1400 years ago to a man called Muhammad, who, peace be upon him, which we understand to be the last prophet,
Hmm.
who was kind of given the teachings by God on how to live a good and responsible life. That is, in essence, kind of what it is. And so within that, there's different, what we call different pillars of faith on how to live that kind of good, responsible life with the understanding that we're trying to get to the next life, the kind of hereafter, which I guess in kind of common understanding would be this idea of heaven and hell. So there's kind of different pillars of faith associated with Islam, and the basic is understanding that there is only one God, and that Muhammad, peace be upon him, and I'm saying kind of peace be upon him as like a sign of respect, was God's last prophet. So there's a connection between Islam and different faiths. So Judaism and Christianity being what we call kind of faith of the book. So we understand kind of Jesus, or as the name's known in Arabic, Isa, or Moses, as the name's known in Arabic as Musa, are connected as prophets as well. So we kind of believe in their teachings as well. But what's maybe different from those from Christianity and Judaism is the understanding that Muhammad is kind of the last of the prophets in that lineage.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it's an interesting connection, but also this difference that means that believing that Muhammad, peace be upon him, is the last prophet is a basic tenet of Islamic faith. And there's other kind of pillars associated with that. So there's praying. So probably what's most commonly known is that Muslims pray 5 times a day as a way of strengthening their relationship with God. Giving money away to charity is also a really important kind of mark of faith. Also, probably what kicked off our interest in having this discussion is fasting. So people may or may not know that there's a month called Ramadan in the kind of Islamic year, which is a month of fasting for Muslims. And within that, it's understood that Ramadan's a really special month because the Quran, which is our kind of holy book, which has all the teachings of what Islam is and kind of how to live a good life, essentially, were revealed. The first verses were revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in that month. So it was actually during lockdown that Muslims were observing the month of Ramadan, which this year was kind of mid-April to mid-May. So that's another kind of mark of faith. And another one, actually, something that's going on right now is the Hajj pilgrimage. So if Muslims are kind of financially able or physically able to go on a pilgrimage to Hajj to Mecca in Saudi Arabia, they're encouraged to do so at least once in their life, which is like a really, really big thing, really important moment. And
is that the big sort of black box
where
you see a lot of people sort of around it?
Kind of circulating it, exactly. So the black box is the Kaaba. It's kind of there's a really like important story connected with it with Prophet Abraham, which is also part of that kind of lineage of prophets. But Mecca is also the place where Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was born, and it was in that place that the Quran's first verses of the Quran were revealed. So Mecca's got a really important kind of place within Islam. And also, I don't know if you've actually seen when Muslims pray, or you might have seen it when they're kind of circulating the Kaaba and when they're kind of praying and prostrating, like bowing down. Wherever you are in the world as a Muslim, the direction in which you pray is towards Mecca.
Yes.
Yeah. So going on Hajj is like a really important pillar, and that's actually going on this week in Saudi. But because of the pandemic, you won't see kind of, I think it's like 2.5 million maybe Muslims a year who make that journey from all over the world. And this year, because of the pandemic, the government's only actually allowing maybe 1,000 Saudi citizens to undertake that pilgrimage, which is really nice that it can carry on, but also really sad because I don't think I've ever seen in my kind of whole life, when I look at pictures and kind of on the TV, I've never seen Mecca look so empty as it has in kind of the last few months. So yeah, that's kind of the overview of kind of Islam. And as I said, I've been Muslim since I was born, and my family are all Muslims. But something I've always kind of come up in conversations when I've had with people of the same faith or different faiths, or people of kind of no faith, is that my experience of my faith is very individual. I think everyone has an individual experience of trying to figure out what their faith means to them
Mm.
and what their relationship is like to that. And I'm kind of no different in that. There's moments where I found kind of relationship with faith quite difficult, trying to understand and figure out like how does that work in my kind of day-to-day life and what does that mean to me. And the moments where the actual challenges that I've faced in life have been made easier because I've had my faith with me.
Mm.
So yeah.
Yeah, I find it endlessly fascinating. One of my favorite subjects at school was RS, like religious studies, and I remember bits of what you were saying there. During those years of learning, I remember writing. Isn't there a symbol every time you write Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him? Like you do a bit of. There's a symbol after his name that is supposed to signify peace be upon him. Is that right?
Yeah, so I'm guessing a peace be upon him is written in Arabic.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's pronounced Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So it means like, and peace be upon him. So
Yes.
that's, so you tend to hear, I keep saying it in English, but you tend to hear people say it in that Arabic, and that's probably what comes after when you see the name. But
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's in essence, it's a mark of respect and understanding of kind of the importance that they have within the faith.
Mm.
Yeah.
What's quite beautiful, I think, and also I don't think that's talked about that much is, I mean, you talked about yourself, sort of talking to people of different faiths as well as within your own, is this connection between people of faith, even though it's different. It can be seen sometimes as sort of like this faith is so different from this faith, and therefore they can't. Do you know what I mean? This sort of conflict,
Yeah.
but a lot of the stuff you're talking about. People have found their own journey and their own principles and values in their own faith. Talking about a prophet, like Jesus, and like you say, within your within Islam, you sort of embrace the Judeo-Christian prophets to a certain extent and their stories, and also giving to charity. These are all things that I think most people who are in a faith or are of faith or even know just vaguely little bits about religion can relate to and understand. And I think most of what you're talking what you're talking about and most of what can be found in sort of religion is can be really beautiful.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And honestly, I think the most open and beautiful conversations I've had have been around faith. And there's
Mm,
this kind of unsaid connection with people of faith, regardless of what that faith is. I
mm,
think I mentioned to you when I was going to volunteer in Nepal, which is a Hindu majority country. It was the first time I'd ever done anything like that, like kind of leaving home and living abroad. But I was also really conscious of, okay, how will my faith be perceived? Because, practicing it, for example, praying 5 times a day, it's not necessarily you could do it in private, but it's also quite a public thing.
mm,
Um, and I was actually quite worried about, okay, how will that work in a Hindu majority kind of environment? We're living with kind of our host families. Like, how does that work? And I even wrote an email to VSO, the kind of organization that was supporting us. Like, has anyone else who's been Muslim ever like done ICS or gone through this experience? Like, how does that work? And they're really kind of supportive, and they didn't necessarily say that there's anyone who'd done it, but they were like kind of the host families that we pair with and community that we work with, like we do a lot of work with them beforehand. But I was still quite reserved, and I
mm,
think when I went out there, I didn't ever openly say to anyone like, okay, yeah, I'm Muslim, and kind of make sure I had that discussion with anyone. I still kept it quite private. But there was moments where I was praying and I'd finish, and obviously you're with your counterpart, which is a Nepali volunteer, and Suraksha was the volunteer I was volunteering with, and she told me after, she goes, "Oh, I hope you don't mind, but I actually filmed you praying." And I was like, "Okay, that's interesting. I've never been filmed praying." And she goes, "Well, I've just never seen it before, and she's a Hindu. She's like, I've never seen that before, and I was just really interested in what you were doing." And so it really sparked this conversation of trying to understand each other and this kind
mm,
of kind of like an unsaid language sometimes when you know that someone else has a faith, and it doesn't have to necessarily be the same as your own, but this kind of act of believing in something that is bigger than you is a really powerful and beautiful thing, and it can connect people in different ways. And then that moment kind of extended to the host family when I was praying, and kind of my host mum actually came in, and she just quietly kind of put water next to me and just left. And that kind of small act of recognizing that I was praying and it was something that was to be kind of respected. And we never had that conversation between us of what I was doing and what I wasn't doing. I just found that really beautiful. And yeah, and the kind of conversations with other people of faith who just kind of get it sometimes, even if it is something that is different. Yeah, it's a really powerful thing.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a lot of things that you sort of connect over and have connected over with other people of different faiths. But do you find sort of main aspects of both of your faiths that sort of jump out and seem to connect more than others? Are there certain aspects of it?
I guess it is that thing about, like I mentioned, of believing in something that's bigger than you, but something that's also quite. So I'm kind of studying my masters at the moment, and I have a colleague who's Christian from Ethiopia, and we've had a discussion about kind of our different faiths and kind of understanding how religion might play a role in kind of the course that we're doing at the moment. And there was something that was really interesting that sparked in that conversation on how you need to have faith that things are planned the way they're meant to be, and things are kind of having a trust that the situation you're in at the moment is the situation you're meant to be in, and instead of wondering kind of why you're in it, it's having this understanding of figuring out kind of what can you learn from it, like why are you in that situation. Or you must be in that situation to learn something, or there must be some sort of experience that you're having that is necessary kind of for you to have. And having that kind of belief, I guess, and I've come across that when talking to other people of faith, that they understand that there's something bigger than them, but there's also kind of this bigger plan, and they can kind of relieve their worry in a way to that bigger plan. And that has been, I think, when I was thinking about, what were you going to talk about in this conversation, because I went through the pandemic at the moment, and COVID-19, and having to do Ramadan in such a different way, I really had to practice on like strengthening that understanding. And that is sometimes like with faith, that is what it is. It's kind of a practice of kind of like a spiritual practice, but practicing things around patience and kind of realizing you're in that moment, and maybe you can make the most of that moment to contemplate or to reflect, or there's something there that you kind of need to pay attention to sometimes.
Yeah. So what was your sort of experience during the lockdown, like what with your faith and just in general?
Really different. Ramadan is okay, so you fast from sunrise to sunset for kind of the 4 weeks if you're kind of physically able to, and you're well enough to. And I've been doing that since I would say year 3, but year 3 was like half days where I just kind of pretended that I was fasting in the morning, and I would basically have lunch by 1.
Okay.
So probably more like meaningfully from when I started secondary school. And normally what you associate with Ramadan is this bigger feeling of community. So you kind of fasting with your family, but there's always kind of more prayers going on in the evening at the local mosque and things. And obviously that just wasn't possible this year. And we as a family kind of discussed it, that we actually were quite worried that you just wouldn't get the same feeling that you would from Ramadan, which is all about community and people coming together. And when you're breaking your fast in the evening, kind of around sunset, it's called the iftar. So you kind of get people together and you eat together and you kind of celebrate that moment of kind of community and coming together. And that just wasn't possible this Ramadan. So that was really, I think we expected that to be more difficult than it was, because I think what was really interesting is when you kind of pare back what Ramadan is supposed to be about, it's about kind of getting closer in your relationship to God, trying to understand your faith a bit more, contemplate and reflect on your life and like how to lead kind of a better, a good life. And there's a bigger emphasis on giving to charity in that month, and more compassion for people who are in need, and to kind of recognize your kind of obligation to be more considerate. So because kind of pandemic almost even more so like forced you to have to focus on those things instead of the thing around, oh, kind of bringing together people so we can eat once we finish our fast. It became easier because we were able to kind of concentrate on that more. And also that thing around, maybe there's a reason we're supposed to experience this. I think I've probably only realised maybe in the last couple of weeks that I don't think we're ever going to get that opportunity again where you are able to focus that much on it without the kind of outside worldly distractions, but also I was able to really focus on that with my family around me. And I thought, like, in a really kind of privileged position to have that experience for like 4 weeks. And I felt
sort
sad.
of like a Buddhist monk, like going into the Himalayas and having that time.
I wish it was the Himalayas. I wish it was the Himalayas.
But having that sort of not seclusion, but being cut off and almost forcing you to look more inward at your family and yourself, sort of thing.
Exactly. And I think even just people of like no faith, I think in some way maybe COVID or the pandemic force us to kind of reflect a bit, whether that is on like just anything, reflecting on kind of where your life's going and what's more important to you and those kind of things. It really did kind of encourage you to really think about that. And I felt, I don't know if it sounds a bit weird, but I felt sad before when Ramadan's over, but there was just this whole different level of sadness when this Ramadan finished, because I thought, like, who knows if you're going to ever get that opportunity again to do that, but like also to be with like the people that you love, to experience that together. And I think I think people have felt that in different ways about COVID and kind of the impact that it had, whether you're of faith or no faith. I think on some level it probably made you think about like so many things.
Yeah. Why do you think that? I find that for some people it's very difficult to get them to spend time alone, like consciously, without doing anything. I guess meditation could be a way of putting it for some people, or self-reflection, or awareness, or this sort of. I find some people it's not very appealing. Don't really see the point of it. It's just sort of like staring at your navel, I think, is one of the terms of just like, or twiddling your thumbs and just basically just doing nothing. You're just sort of sitting there and it's just what are you actually doing? It's a waste of time. Like why do you think that is so unappealing for some people? I don't know if it's a lot of people or some people to do that, and why do you think it's important? Like how do you do it? How do you meditate, or do you like what's that sort of process for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. As you're saying that, like someone popped up in my mind who's a friend who the kind of meditation and reflection just doesn't work. And it's interesting. It's not like I don't think it's a personal reflection of her, but I think there's something about the way society kind of runs and is built that always having to achieve something is more important. Like always having to keep moving and achieving something, and kind of building up points in a way is just really important. And there isn't an immediate gratification necessarily from the outset of it, of like, why would you sit down for 10 minutes and just meditate and reflect for a bit? And there isn't like that immediate value that's very, very obvious in doing that. And I've actually, in discussions with my friend, like sometimes she sees it a bit like not realizing the privilege that you might have to be able to take 10 minutes out and kind of reflect. That's almost a bit, I'm not sure the word, I don't think she actually used the word for it, but I guess I would describe it as this privilege, and then not being aware of your privilege that you have to be able to take 10 minutes out. Like some people just need to get on with their life and kind of, yeah, get out the kind of challenges they face. But I think for me, the kind of process of meditation reflection, I do yoga in the morning sometimes, and that helps me. But also actually praying 5 times a day, that kind of practice, which is also a very physical thing. If you've seen how kind of Muslims pray, it's kind of standing and then you're kneeling and then you're like bowing down. It's also like a very physical exercise
Yeah.
in a way.
Could you
But it's
sort of like, sorry to interrupt. Could you sort of talk us through that? Because like you said, that there's so many different types. You know, there's yoga. I mean, when people think of meditation, they usually think of a Buddha like sitting cross-legged. But for
yeah,
you, you know, like you said, a big part of your sort of meditation, quote marks, is praying. So what? How does that work? What? You know, the physical sort of, if you're doing like an instructional video type thing, only via audio, like what does that, how would you lay that out quite simply for the average Joe and Jane? Like what is that, how does that work, what's going on in your mind and your body and things like that?
yeah. So quite simply, when you're praying kind of 5 times a day, there are certain verses within the Quran that you're reciting as you do it.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Do you choose
and
them,
that's
or are they set the ones to say?
so the kind of main body of it is set, but you
Mm-hmm.
could choose maybe additional verses that may mean more to you, that you
Okay.
want to reflect on in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And the kind of actions that are associated with doing that are set as well. But kind of more beyond the kind of technical, okay, I've got to, so you start by standing up, you kind of put your hands together. I'm doing it, I know you can't see me, but putting your hands together kind of over your heart, and then you're kind of prostrating, which is like bowing on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there is a kind of connection with kind of reminding yourself when you're touching, well, this is my own interpretation of it, kind of when you're touching your heart, you're kind of reminding, kind of centering yourself and like having, thinking about what it is that you're reciting, which is in essence, you're trying to strengthen your relationship with God.
Mm-hmm.
My friend, my Muslim friend, who has a really nice way of explaining it, is like she's going to call on God, like she's got a phone call to make 5 times a day to God, and she's giving her like all her attention to God in that moment.
Yeah.
And the kind of physical movements help to kind of focus and give that attention. This is like my own interpretation of it. Like
Sure. Yeah.
there's other ways that you can try and figure out like why you do those certain movements,
Mm-hmm.
but it is in essence trying to remind yourself of kind of what is important and kind of strengthening your relationship.
Do the movements sort of like get you in the zone, so to speak? Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, you could say that. And I think especially when you're like you're bowing and prostrating on the floor. I'm using prostrating and bowing. I'm not sure if you know what I mean, but like you put your knees down and your kind of your hands go down and your nose and your head like to kind of bow and touch the floor.
Yeah.
And as you when you're specifically doing that position, you're praising God. And that, I guess, is like probably the easiest bit to explain in the whole kind of movement thing. But yeah, that's interesting.
How long does your praying, like I don't know if you call it a session, I'm making it very yoga like, but how long does it typically last for you?
So it depends. So each prayer, there's a kind of different length to it, and it really depends on the individual and how long they take in doing it. Like I know people who take maybe up to kind of half an hour.
Oh wow.
Or some people who kind of take even just 10 minutes to get through their prayer. And it really depends on the individual, though what you have to complete each prayer is set, if that makes sense. But it's kind of up to each individual how long they end up taking. Quite interesting. I've never been asked kind of what the physical thing is. It's really interesting because I'm like, oh yeah, how do I do that on audio? But also, what does that mean to me? It's quite interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's good. That's why we're having the conversation.
Exactly. Yeah. There's certain things, I guess, in your life which you just take for granted. It's just normal. And
Yeah, I just do. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
So can you do it? Like, have you done it 5 times a day for like as long as you can remember? Or, I mean, how much leeway is there with it? Because I'm just thinking practically, I know that a lot of workspaces I've seen and at my university and things, there's prayer rooms and things like that. But how do you find that, like trying to fit it in with the everyday life?
Um, Difficult sometimes. So it's a set time that you need to pray these 5 times. So one's like around sunrise, one's kind of mid-morning, one's mid-afternoon, one's sunset, and one's evening. So I've gone through phases where I've seen them as a challenge of trying to fit them in to my everyday life. So whether that's kind of work or studying, and often there's been moments where like kind of this life stuff takes over and you
Mm,
kind of forget about praying.
mm,
And there's been other moments where I kind of switch my priorities. Like if I prioritize that, okay, every day I need to take that time out to really reflect and pray. I find it's almost becomes easier because I can set my day in that way and things end up kind of evolving around it. And there's different, as I said, it's like an individual experience, and you're trying to work at this relationship. And everyone knows, like, whatever relationship you have to work at, and you have to practice, and you have to kind of reflect. And that's just the same with kind of my own experience of praying and trying to practice my faith and trying to figure out. Um, so, like I said, there's moments where when it's when things are challenging, that kind of overshadows
mm,
my faith. But sometimes I see challenges, I can get through challenges because I have my faith. And even in kind of Nepal, I found if there was days that I wasn't praying regularly, I
mm,
found it really difficult to
mm,
to do stuff. Like I found it really difficult because I hadn't kind of reconnected with why I'm doing the things that I'm doing and kind of my purpose of being there. And I found that I am a very like values driven person.
mm.
So if I can't connect it somehow to this kind of deeper values thing, I kind of find it a bit difficult
Mm.
to function in some ways.
So,
Um,
like,
yeah,
I I can completely get that from a point of view of sort of like self realization and progression and whatever you want to call it. You have sort of like set things. I mean, for some people, it's exercise. If they don't go running for a week or however long, or even a few days, for some people, they can feel, God, I haven't progressed. And for some people, it's meditation or yoga
yeah,
or what else, or
exactly.
singing. The people, whatever it is. Is there, because it's, I mean, it probably from my naivety about religion, but I guess I sometimes see another component to it, and I'm curious how much that plays in. So the other component I mean is um, if I don't, so for example, during lockdown, I'm sure for some people who haven't had to work during lockdown, it's been easier if they've been inclined to set the certain things in place. So I've had a fairly strict exercise regime. If I don't do that, and if I let myself slip for however long, then I feel guilty, and I feel that I'm the one being affected, and and then I just need to pull myself back up for me,
Yeah.
um, but what I'm curious about, because you sort of mentioned that yourself, you're values driven, and if you don't have that time, but is there a component of like having to sort of apologize to, like in Catholicism, you sort of you have confession and you sort of say how you sinned. Is there that sort of thing with praying, if you miss it for a while, that you also have to sort of apologize to God? I know it sounds silly, but like, is there that,
No, no, that doesn't sound silly. I
or is it
understand.
or is it just a personal thing, or is it even difficult to differentiate between God and yourself? And yeah, what's your sort of thoughts on that? If you let's
Yeah, I
say you went
understand.
a week without praying,
Mm.
um, would you feel guilty just for yourself, or is it also a sort of thing of not just apologizing to yourself but apologizing to God as well?
Yeah, no, I completely understand where that's coming from. I do feel guilty, and but then what is a really kind of it is a beautiful thing within like my understanding of Islam, my relationship with God is that when you there's this like kind of understanding that when you turn towards God again, there's automatically that forgiveness
Mm.
that you've kind of had that self-realization and you've kind of turned towards them, and that's great and that's
Mm.
fine because you've had that kind of realization in a way. So there's not a kind of how to describe it. I guess there is a need to, I guess, ask for forgiveness, but it's really with the understanding that that forgiveness is already kind of
Mm.
there.
Sort of like
Um,
the it's granted in the asking type thing.
yeah,
Once you've
yeah,
asked, it's already granted type
yeah.
thing.
If you want to explain it that way, and um, there was something else that kind of someone said to me the other day when we were describing this, like if you're struggling if you're essentially struggling to be able to pray 5 times a day, or for example, reading the Quran, which is written in Quranic Arabic, and there's a certain way that you have to kind of pronounce those words, and you're struggling with trying to read it, there is there's an acknowledgement that within that struggle, there's something like very beautiful within that struggle, and that is already accepted, if that makes sense. So
Right.
it's not like a like almost striving to be kind of, yeah, 5 times a day praying, and I'm kind of praying Quran all the time. There is that kind of almost a benchmark. That's great, but the process and the struggle to get there is in and of itself a really valuable thing.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, that sounds
and
completely understandable. Sorry, carry on.
yeah, no, I'm like, yeah, that sounds understandable, but I'm not saying that I got to that understanding kind of straight away when I was in kind of year 4 or something. This is
Mm.
what I meant when this whole kind of individual experience of your faith is like when you do take those times to contemplate and reflect, you kind of have these almost light bulb moments about realizations about your life, and those realizations make sense in that moment. So when I kind of heard that thing about within the kind of the struggling of it, there's something really kind of beautiful, really accepted. I kind of heard at a moment at a time where, gosh, I wasn't sure if I wasn't necessarily practicing as much as I could, and I was a bit like uncertain of, okay, what does that mean if I was just to like, will I be forgiven? They're not necessarily like in a really dramatic way, but those thoughts do come to your mind. Like if I'm not being kind of not doing everything that is of my faith, and I'm practicing everything, like what does that mean? I think it's natural for people of faith, even people who don't have faith, to think about whether they're doing a good enough job sometimes.
Mm.
Um,
Do you find
yeah,
that some of that pressure? I mean, you're an adult now, so the pressure is definitely going to be less than when you're a kid, because that's the same for everyone. Is, you know, you as a child, your parents have to put a certain amount of shame and guilt and discipline and all that sort of thing. Um, do you feel that you I've forgotten where I was going with this. Um,
is it more kind of self-driven, do you think, or
yeah, like
yeah?
do you feel that the leeway you have is pretty much up to you? Like, is there certain, obviously at the extremes, if you know, killed someone or that sort of stuff,
Yeah.
but the leeway within, but even let's say, you know, like murder or something, you would feel awful for it because you have these set of values, and that is you. um I'm not a person, I don't have a religion that I follow. I was baptized and I was brought up sort of semi-Christian. I went to Sunday school, but you know, I just went because it was fun and stuff. But I have these values, and that sort of guides me. And if I were to kill someone, then I would feel guilty. So how much of it do you think is an external thing? I know it's a really vague question, but how much does sort of outside shame, or and I'm not saying shame in a bad way, because we need, well, in my opinion, we need shame. We need some sort of thing to keep us within our values and keep us within good behavior and being good to others. But how much do you think, as an adult, that comes to you now from the Quran and I don't know if I'm saying that right. Is that Quran?
Yeah,
Quran?
you said that right. Yeah.
And or your parents and things like that. Like how do you find that sort of within yourself? Does it pretty much come from yourself? And if you feel guilty, then that is your indicator of maybe you've done wrong also by Islam and things like that? Or is there part of it where you feel of you having to sort of do you see what I'm getting at in a way?
Yeah. I kind of see what you're getting at. So I actually want to ask you a question back. Like, why do you think shame is important to keep people within their values? I thought it was quite an interesting way of putting it, but maybe I'll attempt to answer your question first, or we can go to that.
No, please. I'm happy to answer the question. I actually really like people asking me questions. I said it in a previous episode, and especially questions.
Yeah, enough about me, Dan. Let's talk about you.
This week on Faiza's podcast is guest Dan. I used to think that positive emotions were all you needed, and positive incentives were all you needed to live a good life, and it feels better and it makes you happy. But I realized that in reality, and through my own understanding of how I function, is you do need, and also through my youth work. So I've done a fair bit of youth work in the past, and during that as well, I realized that going in with just positive goals for the young people, positive incentives, just trying to guide them through positive feelings, is not actually that effective for the absolute most benefit you can give these children and yourself. I think that if you do something wrong, let's make it a little less dramatic than murder. Let's say you shout someone really, someone who's quite vulnerable in your eyes, or someone who's just quite sensitive, I guess, and you scream in their face because they've done something very minor and it's irritated you, and you scream them down, they start crying. I think that where that shame comes in, it's an indicator to me. That's my sort of roadmap, or one of my roadmaps of like, that was wrong. You need to repent for that. You need to apologize for that to yourself. You need to apologize, obviously, to the person. And that shame, even though I think it can tilt, and any negative emotion can tilt too far, as with, I think, positive emotions as well, but too far, and then it can get you down, and then you become racked with shame, and then it, become depression. But I think these negative emotions like shame and guilt can, if used for good, they can be good sort of roadmaps or signs on the road, I guess. So that would be my answer, I guess.
Okay, so it's shame more from the individual feeling than like public shaming.
Sorry,
is that what you meant?
Yeah.
Because I think that's what I thought. Okay, that's quite interesting, because I guess maybe that's not the word I used with shame, but I can't remember what I used, but I felt like I used the word a bit guilty, I guess, if you're not kind of achieving that kind of good, whatever good looks like, that benchmark. But it's interesting that you were talking about, I understood you meant like public shaming, like almost.
Yeah.
Even when I was younger, so my own experience, even when I was younger, I had to go to kind of mosque classes, and you kind of go through this almost, like my experience, I was going through the motions without really understanding why I was doing it and what that all meant. And kind of my parents never kind of always kind of encouraged praying, and encouraged kind of going to mosque and everything. But that whole individual experience thing really came in when I tried to understand what was I doing, and what was I reading, and what does this what did that all actually mean? And I guess when you're in that kind of environment, it encourages you to understand like kind of what good looks like in a way and kind of what practicing means. But I would say that it was less from the external kind of perceptions of whether I was being good or not. But I think I've become more comfortable with, my own individual understanding of what it meant to be kind of a good practicing Muslim or personal faith. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess.
And
My question is around sort of like how much can you do that and still be a Muslim, and keep within the rules, so to speak, I guess, and still, is there a point when, do you know what I mean? That like, I'm just trying to think of a good rule in any religion. So in Jehovah's Witnesses, they don't celebrate birthdays, for example.
Yeah.
And I would ask a Jehovah's Witness, if you celebrated birthday, they don't celebrate Christmas either, and they don't believe in blood transfusions, and they refuse blood transfusions. So if there was a Jehovah's Witness who, grown up as Jehovah's Witness and was very devoted and just as much as you, had their own relationship with God and all that sort of thing, but they decided, actually, I think it's okay to celebrate birthdays. I think it's okay to celebrate Christmas and have blood transfusion. There's certain aspects of it that, through my own relationship with God, I've discovered that I think that's right. Like, how much does that sort of play into your experience with it? Like, are there certain rules that you feel that it's best not to question, or that it's purely your own relationship, or there's certain things that you have to do in order to be a Muslim and to be a good person?
Yeah. I get what you mean. So when I'm talking about my individual experience, that is like marked or shaped, I guess, by the basic things I have to do to kind of strengthen that relationship. So praying 5 times a day and fasting, giving to charity, those kind of things help shape it. It's an interesting one. And I guess not doing that, like, so for example, the kind of purpose of all that is try to get to the next life. So in common language, that's kind of heaven, and that's hell. So it's very clear, it kind of within the Quran, within the teachings, that if you don't do these certain things, then you will. There are very clear kind of punishments for that, and that's what I guess when I was younger, that's all I would understand, and that's all I would see. That if I was to not do this, then I would get that punishment in the kind of hereafter. But then what I've learned from this kind of individual exploration of it, which is really interesting actually, is like, so for example, within the Quran, that kind of says, point blank, XYZ, you do that. Like if you kill, that's a punishment. If you steal, kind of that's a punishment. And that's all I would understand. But when I kind of grew older, what was really kind of really more encouraging is that actually the amount of, within the Quran, the amount of kind of writing that is given to, actually, if you do this, or you do kind of good practice, this is what you can have kind of in the hereafter. In a way, like textually, if you look at kind of the language or the linguistics behind it, it's sometimes quite plural and even quite vague. But the idea is that those possibilities are so infinite that they're not necessarily written down. But it's really clear that if you weren't to do it, what the punishments would be.
Sure.
But kind of when I got older, I refocused on, actually, there's so much good that could come out of me practicing my faith. And I have no idea what those possibilities might be, but I know that they're kind of out there, if that makes sense. So yeah, you do need the two things to almost, I guess what you're getting at is almost to like regulate in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I guess
like
it's like the
regulate.
law, isn't it? It's like
Yeah,
everyone
like
has to abide by the law, and they
yeah,
have to be aware of the
kind
laws
of
of the
where the
land of the
boundaries
country.
are.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, the boundaries are and things. And I think I would agree. You do need um those kind of that kind of boundary of understanding. And then if you're not doing it, or if you're like kind of crossing the boundaries or something, then yeah, the kind of sense of kind of guilt and everything comes into it.
Mm.
But I guess as I've grown older and I've kind of figuring out what my relationship is more, I've become more aware of the kind of more the possibilities and the restrictions.
Mm.
Does that make
Yeah.
sense? Are we? Did we
Yeah.
get? Did you get to kind of an answer of our questions? I
Yeah.
don't
No,
know.
I think the question was quite vague, so the answer could be vague as well. I think it's fair.
Yeah,
I
done.
guess
That's it.
one more specific question, and take your time if you
Yeah,
need time to think, and also be as specific or as vague as you want to be, because it's maybe a more personal question. Has there
yeah,
been
sure.
any, and it could be in a childhood, it could be as an adult, has there been any rules or practices or things within your own religion which you've really come into conflict with personally? Um, I, I I can think of examples. You know, most religions I can think of more examples that I agree with and I live my life by anyway. But there are obviously certain things that I don't. So for you as an individual, having your own personal relationship with the religion and with God, and have there been any specific sort of things that stand out where you've sort of taken a lot longer to get your head around it and been like, why did we do that? And
Mm.
you more from a disagreeing point of view as opposed to, well, I guess it's misunderstanding as well. But yeah, has there been any sort of areas of internal conflict between the sort of the norms of the religion and the rules and your own sort of personal take on it?
Um, that's an interesting one. I think when you were talking, there wasn't. It's not necessarily a conflict per se, but I guess um, so within Islam, Muslim women are expected to wear the hijab, and there's different. So that's the kind of headscarf or head covering.
Hmm.
That's just over the head. There's a difference between the niqab, which is a kind of that face covering. But focusing on the hijab, so just the head covering, there is an understanding with Islam that Muslims are Muslim women are meant to wear that, and there's
Hmm.
kind of various debates and various different interpretations within Islam. But in essence, that's what kind of the majority of Muslims believe.
Hmm.
I've never been in conflict with that. I don't wear a hijab,
Hmm.
but I've it's been something that I've tried to understand a bit more because
Hmm.
I mean I have there's people kind of within my family and my Muslim friends that wear the hijab and kind of made that choice to wear the hijab.
Hmm.
But it's become more complicated for me, I guess, because of the perception around Muslims and this kind of bigger narrative around Islamophobia and prejudice of Muslims, because there's been so many stories and experiences, just not like with my own kind of Muslim friends who are women who've
Yeah.
experienced kind of harassment and prejudice, and that's kind of added a layer of to like this choice of whether I wear one or not, and
Hmm.
I'm not like I can completely understand when I speak to my Muslim friends who wear one. It's There's different reasons that they've done it. Some have been around, it helps them to strengthen their faith in a way. It kind of
Hmm.
gives them this feeling of protection and this feeling of um, kind of like ownership over their identity.
Hmm.
And I think that's a really beautiful thing. I think it's not necessarily a conflict for me, but yeah, it's just become more complicated because there's this whole narrative around kind of yeah, just the kind of British or even just like the Muslim community generally that
Hmm.
um, I think everyone's experienced it when there's a kind of stories of terrorism or something. There's just a kind of this like negative perception that
Hmm.
has evolved around the Muslim community, even if you could call it a community, because everyone's kind of everyone's different within a community and things.
Mm.
And yeah, so that's kind of been the most, yeah, the most thing that I've like kind of reflected on, like, do I or don't I? And I'm
Mm.
really, I feel like I'm really early in that figuring out of kind of whether I do or not.
Yeah.
Want to, even if I want to work, but just understand why it's something that should be worn, and what's the kind of understanding and the teachings behind it, and kind of speaking to different people who wear it. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of the thing that's kind of come to mind the most. And there is a thing around, I don't think I personally experience um kind of prejudice or things around Islamophobia kind of directly, because I don't have that visible, like, oh, she's Muslim, because it's very visible if you're a Muslim woman wearing a headscarf that you are kind of 99.9% you're a Muslim.
Mm.
Um, but even in some instances where I have been practicing my faith, and it's very obvious that, for example, in a workplace, I would go and I would pray, I'd be in the room, and like this kind of, when people don't really understand that, and they have
Mm.
that perception that they might have got from kind of media, and picking up like bits and pieces of what they think Muslims are about and stuff, that has sometimes been a bit uncomfortable.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
that's just me like going to a room to pray, and that's not necessarily me kind of openly wearing a headscarf all the time. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned then that you haven't really received any prejudice directly. Is there certain instances where you did, or you you see a problem within, you sort of have pointed to it here, and sort of the perception of Muslims and Islamophobia? um is there either things that have happened to you directly, or is there problems that you see um in the media, or with politicians, or whatever, that you think has been an issue for you in your life and has affected you quite negatively?
Yeah, I think probably what springs to mind is normally, it is associated with kind of instance of terrorism,
Mm.
and your automatic feeling is just one of like horror whenever you kind of see an incident. But
Mm.
I've had conversations with kind of other like Muslim friends that sometimes for a Muslim, the second thought after this feeling of horror is like, I hope it's not, I hope it's not
Yeah.
going to be connected with Islam in any way,
Yeah.
because like that's just like another thing that just adds to this
Mm.
perception. It's like, why is it that the an individual's action is then used to kind of cast all these kind of misconceptions around the whole community? And
Mm.
that's kind of really difficult. And I remember even when you asked, like we were having the conversation and me coming on to kind of do the podcast, I was like really wanted to emphasize that, oh, I'm just talking about my individual experience of faith,
Mm.
because there is this bigger narrative about this like imaginary kind of all Muslim community, and they all do a certain thing, and there's some misconceptions, and that's why I
Mm.
didn't really want to go into like the really theological bits around my faith. I just want to talk about the individual experience, because it's quite rare to have an opportunity to talk as an individual sometimes.
Mm.
And yeah, and kind of when I say I haven't had a personal experience of prejudice, is because I have friends who've worn the hijab who get like shouted out on the tube, or have been kind of physically assaulted in some cases
Wow.
because they're wearing like headscarves and things.
Mm.
So when I'm talking about I haven't had discrimination directly, it's like that's what I mean. But
Mm.
I'm very aware that I'm part of a wider kind of part of a wider society, and kind of the politics in the last kind of few years have really brought this prejudice to the fore. And it's for whatever reason that kind of prejudice, and not just Islamophobia, but I think kind of other prejudice are made, it's like it's kind of okay to have those views in
Mm.
society. And it's, yeah, it's difficult, but I don't, yeah, it's difficult sometimes.
Mm. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, what um, do you think? What do you think are some of the key ways that um, can maybe help these misconceptions of Islam and this horrible prejudice? What do you think can help to heal these sort of divisions and these ways, these sort of ignorant views of the religion and the individuals? Do you think more education needs to happen, more understanding in general?
Yeah, and I think just like you and I having a conversation like this, like who knows what that can do
Mm,
for whoever listens. The fact that you've taken ownership over your like understanding that there's a gap within your own knowledge and something that you're really curious about and you want to find out, and you know, I wouldn't say you've gone to a source of knowledge, but you've gone to someone who can give you a bit of an insight, and then we can talk about it and we can have a conversation. And I think that's a really brave and like good thing to do. I think yeah, that piece around, I don't think anyone can underestimate the power of kind of storytelling and conversations within this.
mm,
Because a lot of it is around perceptions, a lot of it is around kind of different narratives and images, and sometimes to cut through this story, like a bigger story, you need different voices and different storytelling.
mm.
So I don't think we can really underestimate the potential kind of power of that. Um, and yeah, it's interesting because I don't think it's kind of, I wouldn't say it's similar to the current conversations around Black Lives Matter, but in terms of just the general idea of prejudice and whose responsibility it is
Mm,
to educate themselves around that, the kind of current conversations are the onus is on those individuals that need to realize that they might have a kind of jaded view, and they should take ownership and responsibility to figure that out and to find kind of sources of information to do that. And education is really important in that, and it's important not to almost burden the communities like it's community's problem to deal with it and make sure everyone understands.
mm.
Yeah, and there's a really cool poet called Sahima Manzoor Khan, um, and she wears a hijab and she does a lot of poetry around her experience of kind of Islamophobia. And there's this one poem, and I'm annoyed I can't remember what the title is, but I remember listening to it, and there was this thing around, um, and like I hopefully she never listens to this because I don't think I'm gonna quote it right, but um, it was something around basically if we have to prove our humanity, and she's speaking from a kind of a Muslim experience and perspective, like if we have to consistently prove our humanity, maybe we're not the ones that aren't human.
Mm.
Um, and that just, yeah, that's always when I heard that, that just always stuck. It has stuck with me. And sometimes it's really easy to be like, well, do you know what? It's up to the Muslim community to break down those perceptions. And I think that is an important part of it, but also it's the kind of onus is on those individuals in some way to help build those bridges as well.
Yeah, and I think again that comes back to the sort of praying and meditation, doesn't it? It's the more aware you are of yourself, the more you can actually realize what the negative impact or the negative things you're doing. And like you say, I think definitely it is on the people that are being hateful, are spreading this sort of thing, for them to look inwards and for them to really see what they're doing. And I think, yeah, I think it's really really important, and for people just to, yeah, not jump to conclusions, not to believe everything they read, and yeah, I think that's one of the beautiful things I see in religion. And I think, yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I can't think of another religion that sort of it's normal to pray 5 times a day, but I can definitely see see the benefit of that, and just having that time, like I say, from a secular point of view, to set aside that time, to reaffirm your relationship with God, or continue to figure it out. Has there been has there been, I mean, there clearly has, but like, what's your sort of basic evolution of your attitude towards prayer since you were young? Like, I can think of when I was a kid, like, I was praying to be James Bond, and I was praying to, have all these sort of things, and as you
The
get
material
older,
stuff.
yeah. Has that been one of
I
the
always
main
wanted to
things?
fly. I don't know about James Bond, but I just always wanted to fly.
Oh well, you
That
should
was like
keep
the
praying for that. That's a pretty
Yeah,
cool.
that was like the ultimate. That was the ultimate superpower to have.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
or invisibility, but like the flying, definitely. Yeah, that took up a lot of prayer time.
yeah. Have you had a lot of dreams
um,
about flying?
I don't think I have. Not dreams, no. But you know those dandelion things.
Uh,
Those like things. I don't know what they're called, but like those dandelion plants, and they always like float in the wind over like the summer.
what, like really, really big head, but quite thin sort of stems, and they're quite.
Yeah, and they're kind of white and fluffy.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why, when I was younger, I always, whenever I saw them, I thought that is like, that is the epitome of like how to fly, like those like
Nice.
things within the wind. Yeah,
Yeah, just
but I
sort
don't know, I just said that like a memory just came back.
of just sticking your
Um,
arms out and just spinning really fast.
yeah, no, it was the elegance, Dan. It was the elegance.
Okay. I think that would be quite scary if you saw someone like spinning really fast and taking off.
Uh,
But yeah,
um, so my evolution,
yeah.
yeah, that's an interesting question. I think so. When I was younger, I was always go to kind of mosque classes, and um, the actual kind of the whole physical stuff was more of like a almost a game, I guess. You didn't really
Mm.
understand why you're doing that, and you'd kind of break out and poke your friend next to you and stuff. And then yeah, as I kind of got older, um, and I understood like why I was doing kind of what I was doing, and I came to that understanding in my own way.
Mm.
Um, what I was praying for, I guess, was less around being able to fly and like the material stuff. Um, there's actually just essentially kind of more guidance, I guess.
Mm.
More trying to like more help trying to figure out like what was going on, whether that was like a personal challenge or something.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, and just like a strengthening of faith. I think that's the kind of the current feeling. And like I said, like um, it's in those moments of contemplations I have like all these like realizations. I will find something, I might read something in the Quran, or I might read something around Islam that just makes sense in that moment.
Mm.
And quite a recent one is, so there's a verse within the Quran that with any hardship comes ease. So the understanding kind of whatever challenge you're going through, you should have faith that there will be kind of easing of that burden.
Mm.
And I've heard that one so many times, but it's only recently when you look into the kind of the way it's written in the Quran in the Arabic, is that the hardship is it written in a singular way, but the ease is kind of plural. So you might have like one kind of really difficult challenge, but if you have faith that that will get that burden will become kind of eased, there's so many multiple ways that you might get that kind of blessing at the end, or kind of the ease of that situation,
Right,
or it might
right.
happen in so many different ways. And I was just like, whoa, like when you have those moments of like, oh, I read that so many times, but I didn't understand it in that way.
Wow.
Um,
That's really
so my
interesting. I sort of visualize
yeah,
that like you're going down a very narrow, very difficult path with like thorns in your way type thing, and it's like really dense. But then when you come out the other side, there's loads of paths and they're really open, but they're all sort of beautiful and nice in their own different way. That sort of thing.
yeah, exactly. And then the other thing kind of connected with that, and I think, and maybe it's just the experience of having been locked down for, I don't know, feels like, what, has it been 5 months maybe?
Yeah, I think.
Kind of, yeah. But maybe it's because of the experience of being locked down, I end up kind of picking up on these things more. But the other one is around this idea around challenges, but maybe when you're in when you're in that kind of path of thick thorns, if you carry on with that imagery, I can see that in my head as well. But you're actually, so the understanding that you're never burdened with more than you can handle.
Right.
So whatever challenge you're in, like it's been said, like within the Quran, there's a verse saying that you can handle that. Like you're never burdened with anything more that you can cope with or that you can handle, and like you have the kind of abilities to deal with that. And then from that hardship, you don't know the amount of possibilities that might be possible from you experiencing that challenge in a way.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I guess that's a long way of saying I've got a bit more mature since since asking.
That's beautiful. It's a very motivating thing. It's you know, again, I think it can be easily seen that these sort of texts and these religious books can be very like dogmatic and just a way. It's like, I've got to do this, got to do that. But actually, that sounds like something really, really motivating, really beautiful that you can take and then bring that into your own life and get you through these hardships. And yeah. Have you got much more time?
To talk?
Yeah.
Gosh, how long have we been talking?
Just over an hour.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I've got time.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I was just gonna go into fasting.
Yeah.
Because so why do you because I guess it ties in quite nicely. You sort of go through a hardship and then at the end you got your
got some food.
Yeah, instead of path it's just different plates of food. That's brilliant. So what is the reason for why is Ramadan at that time? Like I get it seems similar to sort of Lent, you know, when Jesus was in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights, and you know, we, or Christians, I guess, who observe that will give up something, usually like chocolate, because everyone's addicted to chocolate. So what is that from? Is it from the same story or is it from a different story? What is the reason to fast, and do you know where sort of that sort of comes from?
Yeah, so Ramadan is probably is like the most special month within kind of what you want to call an Islamic year, and it's because it was in that month that the first verses of the Quran were revealed to the Prophet Muhammad.
Right.
So that's why it has like such a special kind of place. And as I mentioned, it's one of the kind of 5 pillars of Islam, like one of the key things that a Muslim should practice.
Is it the same
and it's
sort
something,
of time every year?
It's not. So I don't know the technical stuff around the Islamic calendars, but it shifts like back every year, like maybe by like a couple of weeks. So this year it was mid-April to mid-May, whereas like the last few years it's been like in the dead of summer, so it's like coming back very slowly. But that does mean in the UK we're looking at kind of 18-hour fast between sunrise and sunset, which means no food and no water. So what you would do is that you would get up at just before kind of sunrise, and you'd have kind of a meal, and then you do some prayers, and then you go like fasting in the day, and then you'd break your fast at sunset.
And what's the reason to fast?
So the reason to fast is to there's different reasons, but it's mostly to almost commemorate a really special month, because it was a month that was observed by the Prophet as well. And the point of fasting is to different reasons, but mainly to strengthen your relationship with God, but to remind yourself of kind of how to be compassionate for those that are maybe in more need than you. So the emphasis on charity is a really big thing. And it's such a blessed month that you are encouraged to increase kind of your prayers as much as possible, because I don't want to simplify it, but you'd get really good brownie points in a way, kind of like building up your kind of set of good deeds is really important in the month.
So is it sort of like the actual lack of food isn't the important part. It's more like putting yourself through a hardship, and that is the main thing of it. Like putting yourself through these hard times, and through the hard times, you'll become closer to God, and you'll learn. You'll sort of become more humble, or you'll sort of learn your place in things more. Is it sort of about that
Yeah,
hardship itself?
yeah, kind of. I think one way it's been explained is that to make you realize that your sustenance is like almost relies on God.
Right, right.
I've not interpreted it that way myself necessarily.
Hmm.
What I feel like when I fast is because I don't need to think about this kind of almost worldly things around food, around water. It helps me practice like a ridiculous amount of patience.
Mm.
Um, and I think patience is a really important thing when you're thinking about faith and kind of patience in with yourself of like how you're
Mm.
practicing that faith and whether you're doing a good job or not. The kind of back to our discussion around kind of feeling guilty, but patience in maybe in what you're asking for, whether it's kind of for more guidance or whether you're asking for something, and patience in that kind of bigger trust that there is a bigger plan,
Mm.
and you may not know what that plan is at the moment. But yeah, for me that's kind of the main thing. What I get from
Mm.
fasting is this, yeah, just being able to expand that kind of ability to be patient.
Yeah, well, I
Yeah.
completely relate to that. I don't know if I'd mentioned this to you before, but I've been doing my own fasting since
Oh,
start of
nice.
March. Yeah, so it's interesting actually because fasting, I obviously it's been a thing within Islam, a pillar of Islam for as long as Islam has been around, and I think that Buddha also was fasting for 40 days maybe, or something
Yeah,
with
yeah,
Siddhartha Gautama, I think, or whoever the Buddha was, and obviously with Jesus, and so these sort of things have been around for a long time, but it's become more of a trend in the last few years, hasn't it? Like a
yeah. The
diet
intermittent
thing.
fasting diet. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but so I always saw it as a fad, basically. I'm interested in anything that makes us healthier, because I think if we're healthier, then we're able to do do better in our own lives and also help others more. I think if you have a
yeah.
strong
Definitely.
base mentally and physically, then you have that strength. But anyway, so
Yeah,
I sort of heard there's lots of diets that come and go, and like Atkins or the keto diet, or all these different things. And I thought fasting was just a bit of that. I thought it was just for people that just wanted to get skinny, and I wasn't interested in that. But more and more, it seemed to be persistent. Became aware of it like quite a few years ago. But more and more people I knew from different walks of life were doing it, and I actually had a friend about maybe 5 years ago who he's not Muslim, but he fasted during Ramadan exactly as Muslims do. And so that was interesting, and he was working like solid during that time, and he was helping out a friend in one of my friend's shops, and he looked awful, like he was really struggling because it wasn't something he was used to. It was the first year of doing
no.
it, and he wasn't drinking water either. I think, or maybe he
Yeah,
was.
that's part of it. Not
Right.
drinking water as
Yeah,
well.
so
Yeah,
I was just like flabbergasted by this. But anyway, I became more aware of it, and I was like, oh, maybe it's not foul. I'll just look it up, and I started to see the normal things you get, like reduces cancer and all that sort of stuff. I was like, oh, okay, well, usually the big changes in my life is when I'm like, I'm just going to give it a go. So that's how I gave up alcohol. Is I just over Lent at the end of first year of uni, I just said, oh, I'm just going to give up alcohol, and then over time I've just cut it out to the point where I'm almost teetotal, but I have like I don't restrict myself no matter what. So yeah, I thought I'd give it a go, and um, it is something I'm going to do. Like it is set now. It's like I'm not. There's no
oh
turning
really?
back. Yeah, it has been amazing for me, and patience is actually a good, like, it's really interesting that was the main word that you associate with the benefits from fasting and Ramadan. Is because I eat a lot, and it's just pretty much if anyone spends a little bit more time with me or a day or two with me, they'll realize, oh, actually, you eat quite frequently. And Emma, my partner, would comment about, I'd get a bit angry, or not angry, but like, I get a bit like, oh, aggy, I guess is the word, if I hadn't eaten and I need to eat and I'm getting hungry. And this is a thing in my family, like the Brown family, is just you're getting a bit aggy when they need to eat. So I thought I'd give it a go. And the patience was the main thing. It was like, instead of giving into this urge of like hunger, which I think I'd always made an excuse for, because unlike other sort of more superficial urges like sexual urges, or even eating stuff that's not very good for you, or alcohol, or these sort of superficial things, I've always justified eating frequently because it's like, well, I need to eat, like we need it to stay alive. But actually having this time period, so I do 16-8, which is the most common. So I eat from 12 noon till 8 p.m. and that is my window to eat. And then I'm not allowed to eat for 16 hours, which sounds like a lot, but then you're sleeping for most of that, or some of that. So the main test for me is actually the morning.
When you get up.
Yeah, because I can only eat at 12. And the first day I did it, I was ravenous. Like I was eating so much. As soon as 12 came, I had like 3 meals. And I thought that was going to be me, how I continued. I thought I would actually just eat the same amount, but just within the 8-hour window. But I really haven't. Within a couple of days, I was eating less. I was like, what is going on? I was looking forward to this 8-hour window just being a gorge, which technically within the rules it can be. You can eat whatever you want and whatever. But it's been amazing. And the main thing I say, because different people say their own, it's like you say, your personal journey with it, my personal journey, some people say they get more energy. Some people say they lose weight, and that was never really it for me. It was more just to try it out. But the main benefit I've got from it is patience. Is instead of feeling the hunger and going, I need to eat, or feeling the hunger and it just becomes my mind, and the desire is just everything takes over. That just takes over everything. I'm now just like, well, I'm hungry, but I don't care. It's fine. I can't eat until 12, so I'm either gonna be here, and whether I'm working or not, I could just moan about it in myself, or I can, or I could just go, and that there's sort of a weight off my shoulders. It's a sort of like a
relief.
I don't actually need. My reaction to this hunger was part of the issue, and doing this fasting has been an absolute eye opener. Sorry, I sort of went on a rant there, but I just sort of
no, that's really cool that you're doing that.
I really relate to you saying about the patience stuff like that, because that is absolutely the main thing I get out of it. And I can be quite an impatient person in general. I think that's probably one of my main flaws, whether it's being quick to temper, or it's being I want to do something and I want to do it right now. So for me, on an eating level, in terms of eating too much, and on an impatience level,
it's really helped.
It's definitely, and that's what I find really interesting about these religions as old as time is they've got all these things in them that's like, oh well, people have been doing this for a long time and discovering these things about themselves, and so it's fascinating to me that you've found that through Ramadan. And was there any particular insights you feel like you had this year because of lockdown within that sort of fasting period? Because I'm sure that you've learned something new every year during that period, but do you think there was anything particular, or that was sort of concentrated during this time?
Well, I think I mentioned it around like I felt really sad when it was over because I just got this feeling that I wouldn't have that experience again. And I
Mm,
think this year more generally, it's been about really cherishing the people that you love,
mm,
um, cherishing your time that you have with them, and that was the feeling from the beginning of the year anyway. But Ramadan really brought that. So I'm saying Ramadan now. We had that discussion, didn't we, about Ramadan or Ramadan. Um, but yeah, it really brought that kind of lesson or realization. Like it kind of focused it down in that 4 weeks because I mean, who knows if you're going to have any of us are going to experience something like the pandemic again, where you have the opportunity to reflect on kind of what matters to you, who matters to you, and then actually then having the time to do something about it.
mm. Do you think you
So yeah,
might
I think
take that and maybe one day trying to manufacture it, like, you know, go away somewhere for the whole of Ramadan, or try to, I know it's practically very difficult with work and things like that, but
well,
do you think maybe you'd like to one day try to do something similar with Ramadan?
yeah, that's actually a practice that is encouraged during Ramadan. It's kind of
Right,
all self isolating. It's called itikaf, where
right.
you go for like the last 10 days, which are of Ramadan, which is the kind of the whole month is really important, but the last 10 days are the really good ones in a way. You're encouraged to go somewhere and kind of self isolate and just pray. Um, and so it's interesting actually and people do that either in their mosques or even just taking like a room where they're living in a house or something.
Mm,
Um, and so it's interesting with the pandemic and everything, it kind of almost reconnected to what those different practices in Ramadan that were already there anyway.
mm.
In terms of like self-isolating and I guess in a way like social distancing, but in that different way. And I've never done that. I've had family members who've done it and just said that it was probably the best experience that they've had.
Mm.
Yeah, I would love to try that. I think
Yeah.
that would be maybe in the Himalayas.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you'll have to go back to Nepal then. Or
Yeah,
Nepal.
we're gonna have to. Nepal and Nepal, who knows?
No, it's amazing. And for anyone listening, I would recommend, highly recommend, just in your own way, look up fasting. There's many different ways you can do it. You can go all in. You know, you can try something that some people do, like 48-hour fasts and 24-hour. And the one I'm doing is the most common because it's the easiest one to sort of fit around your life. Um, or you know, give it a go during Ramadan.
During Ramadan, yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually considering after this conversation. I'm thinking maybe next year I might set myself that challenge. I think it would be,
Nice.
yeah, it'd be really really interesting to see what comes out of it. And I think, yeah, sort of like how we sort of started the conversation. I think the more people can look at themselves and have that time, and even though it can seem quite scary to, well, not scary, but like um, just to be
Something
left,
different.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, left with their own thoughts, left with their own sort of discoveries about themselves. There's going to be some stuff that you don't like about yourself, and that's always going to happen when you look inwards. But I think, yeah, something like fasting and praying is a wonderful way to learn more about yourself. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Well,
Nice.
yeah. I think we might leave it there on that note.
I think we're at a nice end.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. I'll just say quickly to any listeners, I would love to know your thoughts on this subject. I'm always looking for guests, so please let me know if you'd like to come on the show. Love to get people from other religions or other Muslims or secular people as well that have an opinion on this or anything we've talked about. So yeah, please share this episode around. I personally think this has been a wonderful episode. I've really enjoyed it.
I've really enjoyed it. Thanks for inviting me, Dan.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Faiza. I like we said at the start, before we started recording, we don't really know where it was going to go, but yeah, I think mainly we were talking about sort of prayer and things like that, which yeah was really 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 interesting. So Yeah. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.